All right, all right. I know, I know it's been a long time, but we're finally back. What's happening, everybody? Tim here with another episode of the Thrash and Throttle podcast. I hope everybody's been doing well. I know it's been a long time since I've done an episode, and I am here back in the saddle, getting things together for the rest of the year and kind of getting back on track with the podcast that I started back in 2020. Now, I know there was only 4 episodes that we had to begin with, and a bunch of you guys were bugging me, like just nonstop bugging me to record new episodes because apparently a lot of you liked them. So I am back here again, getting things back on track. I have a bunch of new episodes coming out. I have a bunch of cool guests that I've met over the last couple of years, actually, while I was working a regular 9 to 5 job, going to all these motorcycle events, and kind of occupying my time through the whole COVID thing and not being able to tour and whatnot. So it's very cool to be able to sit down with everybody and get back on track and put out new episodes. So I hope you guys like them. Just to fill you guys in on a couple new things. Obviously, Tombstone is back on track. We have a bunch of new items. We're even coming out with custom vests this year, so that will be rad. On top of that, we have a lot of new bike projects coming out through the Tombstone stuff. For most of you that follow me through the band stuff, obviously Fit has a new record out. We're back on tour. We just finished our first full US in 2 years due to the COVID stuff back in January and February. We leave in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks to head back over to Europe. And we haven't been to Europe since the beginning of 2020. That was our last full tour that we had. So it's nice to get settled in and finally be able to do the podcast, do Tombstone stuff, and have things kind of feel normal. So without any further ado, I want to bring on our guest today. His name's John. He owns a company called Denton Performance Design. He is straight out of Atlanta, builds some killer bikes, and we share a lot of musical interests, which we found out about earlier on in us hanging out and meeting. We met last year at Daytona Bike Week, and we actually kind of met loosely through the Clubhouse app, but I don't know if anybody used that. For a hot second, there was a lot of people using that app, so finally we got to meet at Bike Week, and we've been buddies ever since. So without me talking too much, I hope you guys are stoked, and I hope everybody has a good time listening to this podcast and all the future podcasts coming out. I should be doing stuff every 2 weeks, so I hope you guys like it, and I'll see you guys at the end. So what's going on, man? How you been?
Pretty well. Yourself?
Not bad.
Obviously you just got back from first leg of a tour after a few years, so you ought to be still on a high from that, right?
Oh man, it was definitely weird. Obviously navigating everything through, like, COVID's still going on and not being sure what's going on, and trying to tippy toe around certain things. But overall, it was an absolute blast.
Yeah, definitely from social media pages, you guys seem to have a really good turnout and response to being back active.
Yeah, luckily it's obviously with us, you think when you come back a tour is going to be a little bit better, a little bit worse, or exactly the same, but for us it was just exponentially better. So it was pretty wild, man. Pretty wild. But it's cool to be back. It's cool to be able to, go out and tour again. I leave at the end of the month for Europe, so it's gonna be weird going over there as well.
Right, but that's exciting. That's I would be stoked about that regardless. I mean, like no matter what happens, you're in Europe and you're getting to see a lot of things that most people will never see in their entire life, and doing what you love on top of it.
Yeah, like Europe. I mean, I don't know if you've done Europe before, but it's man, it's one of the coolest places in the world. And like, I don't think. I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoy, Japan a lot and Australia and other places that we've toured, but Europe as a whole for me is probably my favorite. That might change though, with other touring plans and stuff like that later on in the year, which I can't really dive into. But, Europe at the end of the month, like it'll be good to be back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think about it in a cheesy way, Europe's kind of metal as a whole. What we think is old here is not even touching the surface over there. Some of the structures and stuff that still exists, like in the UK, you go into a pub and it's built in the 1490s, it's still there.
Oh yeah,
it's
and
strange.
same thing with restaurants, and it's cool because, like you said, you walk in, and you sit down at this bar or you sit down at a table. And obviously, the tables have changed over the last however many years, but the structure itself, you're touching these walls that have been around for 5, 6, 700 years. And you're like, wow, like this is double the amount that, the United States has been a country. So eating in those places and getting to even play at some of those places is kind of crazy. The history behind that stuff is just so cool.
You're sitting there wondering, like, who was sitting here before me? This is pretty wild. At least that's what goes through my mind. It's
of
like,
course,
who was sitting here?
Yeah, you think about how many people over the last, I don't know, 1,000 years have walked where you've walked, or even when you go to see things like Stonehenge, and you're like, what?
Oh yeah,
what is this? But
right. I mean,
it's a cool thing. It's a cool feeling.
So 2022,
dude.
I'm sure you're ready to touch base on that, but the world of motorcycling has improved.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, obviously you and I talked and we saw each other back in December for the Mama Tried show, and
Oh yeah,
came up with a pretty neat bike, if I do say so myself. If you want to elaborate on that thing, it's the FXXT, right?
No, that was actually the FXXT was sold prior to that around October and was shipped out to a client out west.
Was the
that
FXXT
was the Dyna convertible?
The other red bike.
Yeah, the
correct?
FX. Yeah, that is correct. You are correct.
Okay, that's why I got it confused.
A very non-shameful infatuation with red in every shade of it. It's like my favorite color. So the FXXT was sold. So there was a lot of issues with Mama Tried as far as getting that show to happen, right? And the funny thing is that the original bike, I'll go on record and say this, the original bike that I was invited with was the black one that I built, the FXLRT, a couple years back. And we got up there and everything happened. There were issues, what happened. We made a good time, but there was no show. So when they finally got around to a makeup show, it's like, I remember Scott texting me and saying, hey, can you still make it? It's going to be in center. I was like, I would make it for you guys for anything. This is one of the greatest motorcycle shows that exists. And I mean, I have followed this since it was incepted, before I even started thinking about building bikes as a business. Right. And I was like, well, I don't have the black one, but I have this red bike. And then it was like, so, when I started thinking about progressing forward, they said, we're doing a makeup show, but no one gave me a date. Right. So I didn't have a date and I didn't know what was going to happen. And I'm like, well, I've got to move forward with business regardless of what happens. I can't hold on. I'm going to go ahead and put this thing up for sale. So we put it up for sale, and a guy hit me up and wanted to do, he was interested in it. So we made what I considered a fair negotiation, got the bike shipped to him. And at the time, before I sold that motorcycle, I had actually bought that Dyna convertible. That bike is not very sought after, but I think as years continue to go by, you will see people do it simply because it shares a lot of similarities with DXT and FXDX, Superglide Sport.
Yes.
When I was in Milwaukee, for the hometown rally, I was talking to Logan Lackey of Harley Wheelies, and he has that Sinister Blue and Diamond Ice Dyna convertible this 2000. And he's really what got me pumping on it, was like, because I like Dynas a lot. And so I was like, man, I got to get one of those bikes before the price starts going up. And he was like, yeah, I got mine really cheap at the dealer I work at because it was sitting in the back, and everybody overlooks that bike, even though it's 28-degree brake. It's got dual gauges, dual discs, it's got all the stuff that all the good bikes have. It just doesn't have, the sought after things, what's been made popular.
Of course.
So I ended up scoring it off Facebook Marketplace, dude. I had to go to South Carolina in like the middle of the night. I drove all night. I got off, my day job and drove all night to get it, picked that thing up for $4,800, brought it back, tore it down to the frame, built it up how I wanted it, and took it to Mama Tried. And it was a hit for me. Scott was like, I don't care that you don't have the bike that you submitted, just show me what you got. And he said, I'm sure anything you build is going to be great. And I was like, man, I appreciate that compliment. Showed it to me. He's like, oh, for sure, bring that thing up here,
Of course.
So I did. Now, sad thing is it's in the shop and it's tore apart because we're using it for a lot of prototyping, and I'm trying to further that build to what I wanted to do versus trying to get it done for that week
originally.
So I'm trying to progress on what I originally had set out to do with that bike, and that's what I'm currently working on. But it's actually you talking about red, it's Billiard Burgundy. It's Harley Davidson Billiard Burgundy.
What year was that bike again?
That is a 2000. I like to call that thing the Dirty Dancing Dyna because that's like the only one with that font on the side of the tank and like that cursive. So
yeah, that thing is rad.
I appreciate it, man. It's it started out nothing special.
Yeah, I remember when you first shared those images with me, and I saw that, and the fact that you kind of retro modded it to the point where it's upgraded with all of these things that are new technology and performance wise up to date with the best of them, but it still looked classic enough to where if this bike came out in 2000, people would be like, oh, okay, like it's not too futuristic if it had come out in 2000.
Oh yeah, I mean it was the premise of it was to build something that was kind of it referenced being period correct without being period correct to a point to where we were at 2000 year model technology, and there was, like I said, there was some parts that got put on it that are not going to be there anymore. That's furthering upon that, where the look and style is of that era, but not, we're not riding around on stock, style FXDX shop, something like that. Because I mean, a lot of guys are into the NOS thing. I am for sure. It's just there's a fine line between, okay, does it look the part, but does it also perform? And for me, and what the business that I'm involved in with my company and how we do things here is that aesthetics typically take a secondary seat to engineering and performance. And we want everything to work as a well-oiled machine, and we want to improve upon the particular model that we may be working with at the time and further it from the flaws that are kind of looked over and worry about the aesthetics later. I like to, few things I've tried to encompass this year, when I talk to people about it, is that we use only what we need and we try to make it beautiful. If there's 3 parts doing one job, let's figure out how to engineer that into one part doing the same job. Now we're lighter, things like that are simplistic, minimalistic style thinking, but at the same time will outperform the other bike. You know what I mean? That's kind of the premise.
Yeah, it's that the engineering aspect behind bikes, and obviously that's something that, I don't know if a lot of our listeners know about you when it comes to engineering aftermarket parts and, tearing down what is stock and turning it into, what it should be or what it should have been or stuff like that. It's definitely something for me that is commendable. Like, you obviously share images and videos with me before, a lot of people see them, and seeing what you do and seeing the thought process behind it, behind the engineering aspect of it is pretty rad.
Oh yeah, man. I appreciate that. for sure. That will always be the forefront and focus of what we do, is that everything we do is based off of engineering real world data and applying current concepts, and even trying to engineer further upon those concepts with the latest and greatest technology to build motorcycles that can do things that maybe they were not necessarily engineered to do that well from the factory. And that's not a slight at Harley Davidson. It's just that I don't think a lot of people, they like to lash out on new models and problems they have, but at the same time, taking the feat of engineering a motorcycle from the ground up and complying with every regulation all over the world is no easy feat, and trying to make that a complete unit that doesn't have maybe a minor flaw or a setback in another area. It's almost impossible.
Of course.
So yeah, that's the thing, man. That's at the core of what we do. And you'll always see that from us. We will never be flattering to the mainstream on, I guess you could say, as far as paint. We'll always be
yes.
very minimalistic in that regard, just because, we find elegance in the machine itself and the aesthetics that employs as far as what the machine can do. Visually, I think our machines, personally, to me, and it's always opinionated, I think our machines are beautiful. But at the same time, I think that a lot of machines that are well engineered, you take away from that aspect when it's a $10,000 paint job. Not to say that our paint jobs are cheap. They're not cheap, but it takes a lot to make it not factory, but factory. That's very more complex than people think. It's not the painter's favorite thing to do, I can assure you, because John Lefevre, if he listens to this, he'll tell you he would like to chop my head off for that, because I'm always like, okay, John, this has to be perfect. And we're sitting there using flexible tape to measure logo position and pinstripe width and where those pinstripes are at. And he's just like, man, I can't do this. Like you're driving me nuts.
Yeah, it gets stressful.
For sure. And it sucks because, those guys really like free creativity on doing things. When you hit them with something like what I give them, they're just like, that's boring.
Yeah, well, I mean, right now, I'm about to take one of the one tank set that I have, and I'm going to bring it to a local painter and be like, hey, man, I need this to match this paint exactly. And that's it. That's all I need you to do. And I need you to spray it one color. That's it. And sometimes, that's a little bit more annoying than being like, hey, do whatever you want.
Oh, for sure.
Because even though the do whatever you want mentality might take a little bit longer, usually I feel like with painters and any artist or creator, they're allowed to go outside the box and be comfortable with what they're doing than someone that's like, hey, this is a really simple job to me, but to you it's like, it's nerve-wracking. I just want one thing and one specific thing. And it's a little nerve-wracking.
It's hard. The way I chalk it up is I always try to go with my hat in my hand when I talk to John about stuff, because it's more or less like, to me, the way I view it is it's like someone coming here and telling me exactly how I'm going to engineer a part or a bike, and this is how I'm going to do it. So I understand how it can be a very weird situation, as far as, hey, do this and do it this exact way. So,
well, it's funny because John's the type of guy, he's one of those jack of all trades type guys. Like, he'll put together a bike and he'll build a bike, and at the same time he'll paint a bike too. It's you don't get a lot of guys that can, mechanically put together and assemble a bike, and guys that do really good paint jobs. Usually it's either one or another.
Oh yeah. Most painters around here for motorcycles, if you want your bike painted, you got to take it apart for them. They're not going to do it for you. Now, I could do that to John, but I typically don't. It's just,
well, yeah,
because mainly we're trying to accomplish something on the bike while he has the tens and increase productivity as far as the finish line for the, getting the project completed.
Of course. It's like I could, for me, like, I'm redoing my FXR soon, so it's like I could bring them my entire bike, and get the motor redone and all this shit, or I can take the motor out myself and
Oh
give
yeah.
them the heads, the lower end, the case, all that stuff disassembled, so that they know what they're doing, they know exactly where everything is, and to be completely honest, I don't have to spend an extra $1,500 for disassembly.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know, and I get that. I mean, that's I see that a lot with in the industry with you talk to people about building bikes and stuff and how expensive it is, and it sucks when you are outside of that realm. Like when you're, we both take it for granted that we can do those things. Like
Yes.
it's not hard for me to buy a project bike that doesn't run, fix it up, and make it nice and flip it if I wanted to make a quick profit on something locally. But most people
Yeah.
don't have that luxury. I mean, just owning the tools and the space to do it correctly is an
Yeah.
investment itself versus having the skill set itself. So I get that completely about trying to save money on stuff, because I mean, I think a lot of times people look at Instagram and some of the stuff that gets churned out and think there's this piggy bank or the bottomless pit for us or yourself and other people. And it's like, you don't realize that if I had to think up all these things that I do and pay someone to do it, I could never afford it.
Never,
It just
never.
wouldn't
The
happen,
amount
you
of
know?
and you're creative in the same way that I am, where for us, you know, our brains are working constantly. Our brains are working nonstop, and we always want to create, whether it be music, or me with the leather work, with you with, aftermarket parts, with, both of us with certain things. And, you know, if I was to turn around and go to a guy and say, "Hey, listen, like, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do that," the amount of money and the amount of time that would be spent to get someone else to do it, it's not that it saves time or money doing it yourself, but, like, in the long run, I'd rather me end up making the profit off of it than having to split the profit with, a manufacturing plant or something like that. Obviously there's
Oh
certain
yeah, for
things,
sure.
there's definitely certain things that I cannot manufacture myself. Same thing with you. So obviously we do have to outsource that eventually, depending on what it is. Like, honestly, I can't make steel rule dies. I don't have the equipment for that. I just don't
Yeah,
do it. Um,
right.
the same way that, if you were to make a steel part, like, you don't have a full casting system to where you can just say, "Hey, I'm gonna go cast 100 of these brackets," or something like that. It's such
No,
a massive facility and such a massive operation that, sometimes it's cheaper and it's easier to go with somebody else, but it depends on the project.
it's funny you mentioned that, because the last tab open on my Mac is how to on sand casting. Because I like
Is it
literally was
really?
trying to figure out a bunch of that stuff. Yeah, because I mean I'm always trying to find I think I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of cons to being alive in this day and age. However, there are a lot of pros when you start to look at things um, from a creative standpoint. I don't think society has ever been at the technological level where you can do so much with so little in your own space without having to have these major production facilities. Even if you try to outsource something, you still have the ability to create, design, and manufacture something so much cheaper than it used to be. I mean, it's kind of like we recently have invested into 3D printing, getting some high dollar machines. Later on
Of
down the
course.
road, we would like to invest into some really big 3D printers that are, 30 to 50 to $70,000, that companies like Audi are using to print taillights. They're printing
Of
all these
course.
components for these cars, and so that, taking the injection molding cost out of the picture for us, like these rubber parts that I've been recreating for the DXT, where I can print them literally in our shop on a 3D printer and still have the shore hardness of what the original part was. Like that capability 10 years ago didn't exist for the small guy,
No,
you
of
know? So,
course
I
not.
mean, look at recording. I mean, you can sit at home and do this stuff so much cheaper than you ever could have, you
Well,
know,
yeah, there's
like
guys that
it's
build their whole career, especially recording with their home stuff. Like, you have guys like, for example, I don't know if you listen to the band Periphery, but Misha and the Periphery guys, like all those guys were pretty well versed in home recording before they even started touring. These guys, they were recording their own stuff, they were mixing, mastering all their own stuff from their house, and it got to the point where they would just release so much material and so much personal material that it's like, they just ended up blowing up, and it didn't cost them a crazy, crazy, crazy amount of money because they were doing it themselves. And there was guys that, for that quality of a record, they were charging 40, 50, 70, $100,000, and these guys were just doing it in their bedroom, and it sounded perfect.
right. And I'm with you on that because I think a lot of it comes down to drive and talent. Yeah, for me, I've always looked at things as far as creating parts, right? I look at it as I look at the bar that's been set, not just in this industry, but as like manufacturing as a whole. And what are some things that pop into my mind as the best? Like I look at components
Yeah.
for stuff that would be used in MotoGP and the quality and the level of consistency and repeatability for those parts. And you try to say, well, I want to push myself to be at that level. I think people like that. And I'm sure you've come across it. I've come across people on SoundCloud I've never heard of that you would think that they spent $100,000 recording on tape at Sony BMG, and they did everything from the bedroom. So I'm with you on that it's amazing to me. And I think that's what people do. They go look at major label artists, they listen to the quality, and they're like, you know what? We're going to create our own things. We're going to make our own sound, but we're going to set our level of excellence to mimic this because that's professionalism. And I think when you
Yes.
can wrap your head around that concept, you can project yourself in life so far at what you can accomplish and what you can do with that type of mentality because you understand what you need to do to be where you want to be. And a lot of people have a hard time grasping that. Prime example, look at Chopsky. I
Yeah.
I have known Jason for a few years now, and what that guy has created with the equipment that he started with, most people can't do with a $10,000 camera. And
Oh,
and
yeah,
that's
I
where
agree.
the aspect of talent and drive are two things that money can't buy.
Yes. It's all about, when you're talking about, a creator, whether it be a musician or an artist or a photographer or a bike builder or whatever it may be, a painter. Um, you either have it or you don't. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people that don't have it that, learn and they teach themselves and they get to the point where, their work is really good, but, that's what separates the real artists and the natural talent from someone that, is very well taught, because you can teach anything very well. And if you're good at taking directions and stuff like that, that's a little bit different. But like, listen, man, when it comes to cooking, I'm good at taking directions, so recipes are super easy for me. But that's why I'm not a Michelin star chef. You know,
Oh yeah.
that's that difference. So I totally see where you're coming from with that.
Oh yeah. And I think and I say that about talent, but I will say that no one when it the thing with talent that's so convoluted too is that I don't say that for anyone listening, is that not that oh well, you're not talented, you won't make it or something like that. Talent is born from discipline, um of pushing yourself to do things. You don't know what you're capable of until you try. Like
I
it's
agree.
not every, because think about it, first time you picked up a guitar, Were you considered a child prodigy? Probably not.
Hell no.
That's what I'm saying is that through discipline, you changed that ability to be able to sit down every day and practice into a talent. And that redefining fire of having the drive to do that is what made you into what you do today, and what continually pushes you to progress further in your career as a musician. The same goes for me in this. I didn't ever set out to do what I do right now, not even close. This is not what I had projected myself to do in life. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But at the end of the day, when I decided I wanted to do something, I live, breathe, eat what I do, and constantly push myself to not be complacent and say, you know what, that's not good enough. Try harder, learn more, figure it out with the means that you have in front of you, not sitting here going, well, I could do this if I had that. You can do anything you want to do with what you have and make it absolutely the best. You just have to want to.
Yes. So it's kind of funny that you say that you're talking about this right now, because I kid you not. So I scheduled out most of my social media posts, and even on my personal page, and I was writing out this long caption about effort, and it's kind of funny. I'm gonna put it up within the next couple of days. So when this episode comes out, everybody listening can go back and read it. But it's basically about how, if you want something to grow, you got to put the effort in, and it's, even if you have, like you said, you could have shit equipment, you could have, not a lot of money, this, that, if you put that effort into something, it'll grow. Thinking back to it, it's kind of funny. My cousin up in New Hampshire used to take guitar lessons from this dude, and he's like, oh, I want a new guitar, this one kind of sucks, blah 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 blah, it's not good. His guitar teacher took that guitar from him and just started shredding, right? Just ripping ass on it, just killing it, right? And the kid and my cousin was just blown away, and he's just like, what the fuck was that? He's like, it's not about the instrument, it's about what's in your hands. It's about the effort that you put in. It's about the drive that you have in order to do it. So like, someone with the tools, don't get me wrong, the tools are good. The better guitar, yeah, sure, it's good. But I'll tell you what, you give a 10-year-old kid a $25,000 Les Paul, and you give me a $250 Epiphone, and I'll drag that kid through the streets with how I play. Like that's the thing. It's not about,
you have been skull dragged.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what I'm saying. Like, no offense to any 10-year-old kids that might be listening to this, but buddy, I've been doing it for 20 years. Like that's the difference. That's the knowledge. That's the effort that you put in.
I get it so hard, like you don't even imagine. I mean, there's plenty of $50,000 motorcycles out there that get spanked by a fucking a 2005 Super Glide with almost stock everything, and you got some dude in the back here going, well, you know what, this suspension is shit. I'm calling my builder tomorrow. This is not going to happen. I understand completely. That
exactly.
Yeah, it's all about it comes down to what you're willing to put into it. I completely understand that concept. And it pertains to, you can project that in every aspect of your life. 100%.
Yeah. Businesses, relationships, friendships, hobbies, even hobbies, man. And don't get me wrong, like there's a lot of people they're very good at a lot of different things in this world. But, I see the potential in so many people. Maybe it's just because the way my brain works, and I'm very, I always want to help people do what they love. And if I can just talk to them about, hey, my brain's working this way. Like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And a lot of people don't look at things the way I do. Like, we were down in Florida, and I was hanging out with moto lawyer and his wife, and we're bullshitting, and we're talking about his Instagram following, and he has a good following and he's doing well and it's fucking awesome. But at the same time, like, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't interested in, lawyer stuff and legal stuff. So, like, for me, I was telling him, I was like, hey, man, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And he was just like, oh, my God, like, because he never thought of it that way. He never thought of these ideas of maybe doing, reels about, things that, or, how you can write off your motorcycle, how you can not pay taxes on your motorcycle, how you could just other legal stuff. Because I think mainly he does personal injury, but, in order to gain the notice of other people and gain the attention of other people, you kind of have to step outside of your box. And the same thing with me, I might do metal and I might play metal all the time, but I know in order to grasp or in order to grab the attention of other guitar players, like, I might have to put up some blues stuff once in a while. I might have to put up some jazz or some funk and this, that, and the other thing, because I want to gain the attention of everybody, not just this one little thing.
Oh, for sure, man. I think in my short time of messing around with music that, like, it's amazing to find out what musicians are skilled out outside of the music that they play that you like, that's popularized. Like, how many famous guitarists that have been in the rock or metal genre that were classically trained, and your typical listener is not going to know that or even care. So it's amazing to find out what people have done or what the things they're talented in that regard. I completely get that. And for a guitar player, technicality is technicality. It doesn't matter what you're playing. If you can play it clean, it doesn't matter what the music is. The right person's going to appreciate looking at that and saying, wow, this guy can not only sweep pick cleanly under distortion, but he came over here and, started playing clean and is out here, killing some Albert King or
some chicken picking,
some Lightning Hopkins or something like that, so I think the right people appreciate those type of things. You know what I mean? Like, it's talent like that is more dimensional than just one area.
Oh yeah. There's definitely guys out there that, it's just like talking about athletes, right? Now, an athlete's body, don't get me wrong, there's guys like, I don't think you could take any baseball player, just any old baseball player, and toss him into a hockey rink and think that he's going to do well or do great. But I do think at some extent that he's going to do okay because he has an athlete's mindset.
Champion mentality, man.
Exactly. When you have a musician, listen, I might not play bass well or drums well. Drums are a little bit different. That stuff's way out of my wheelhouse. But, as far as piano or bass, like, I think I could do fairly well,
Of course.
And even in the touring aspect, you take me out of the band life and you toss me into the, I don't know, like, say if I were to work in wrestling entertainment, I know what a show is, right? So, like,
oh, for sure.
For me, transitioning to that entertainment aspect of it, I wouldn't be great, but I think I could I think I could hold my own. And the same goes for a lot of other things when it comes to, same thing, motorcycle painters. They might not do, they might be great at motorcycle painting, but if you toss them into another artistic field, they might not, be the next Picasso, but I think that they're going to do pretty fucking well. Because it's the mindset.
Oh, I agree. There's a lot of topics to touch on that. I mean, I can draw like nobody's business on a computer. You give me a pen and paper and tell me to draft it, and you're going to think a 3-year-old did it.
See, that's,
so I
the
completely
thing.
get it. And the thing though, with the reference to wrestling, is that I remember from a very long time ago, and I talked on the history of that, is that I remember someone putting a bird in my ear at that time without going into too much detail, that it was like, don't make the song so complex that it affects your showmanship. And showmanship
Of
is one of
course.
those things that is very difficult for a ton of talented musicians to wrap their head around.
Oh yeah.
Because people want to see you play, right? They want to, they, at this point, if they've paid money to come to your show and you're pretty well recognized, they know the lyrics. They're not going to be standing there staring at it like, what is this? This is new. Or this opener band was really cool. I'm going to go check them out, and they know your lyrics. They know the songs. There's going to be times where you can stop, make a pause, and not play anything, and they're going to continue the song for you. That's, to me, in the musician's world, that's a huge deal for a live performance, when you can stop and they continue it for you and you can come back in. Because there's a lot of times that, opener bands, you do that, they're going to be like, well, they messed up. But
Yeah,
the
exactly.
showmanship aspect is so complicated. It is hard to actually engage with the crowd and look good while doing it, play the song. And at the time, like, you know what, those guys put on a hell of a show. And it wasn't just musicality. It was like, I felt like they were involved with me in the crowd. That's a big thing.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. When you think about, the showmanship, like you said, like, I've seen so many bands that, don't get me wrong, are amazing at their instruments, but they just stand there
Yep.
like a statue. And it's kind of boring to watch. Like, I would almost rather watch a hardcore band where they're playing 4 chords throughout the entire set, not the song, the entire set, and they're jumping around like a bunch of idiots, like a bunch of animals on stage. And it's going to look better. The feeling, the energy is going to be so much better.
And I know exactly what you talk. I've been privy to that, where you, like, let's say it's a festival and you're spectating. I've seen a band come on that probably didn't play the most complicated music in the world, as far as, like, because musicians, a lot of people will be like, that was a killer song, that was badass as far as technicality. But, like, if you can't get the crowd into it, it's not really worth it. From, like, a musician standpoint, you can look at something like, generically speaking, math metal, right? Dream Theater. Dream Theater is awesome if you're a musician. But if you just want to go listen to a band and vibe with it, that's the worst show to take someone to. They're going to be like, what in the fuck is going on right now? It's been 12 minutes. This guy's still doing a bass solo, Like,
Yeah.
So I understand that aspect, because, like, there's been so many people come through the music world that, like, the songs weren't that complex, but they were the greatest hype dudes ever. But the thing that changed it for me on that was when I found out who, and we'll go back further for these young kids, when I found out who Burn the Priest was. And
oh yeah,
I'm like, and here's the thing, the first time I ever heard Burn the Priest, here's one, because you and I are like a year apart, right? It was my monthly subscription CD to mp3.com.
Wow.
Get you some of that. I still own the CD, because, like, I was like, you know what, this might be worth something one day now. Because when they changed their name and they started signing to, I think they were on Roadrunner later. I can't remember. But regardless, it was refreshing for me to have a band that played such complex music. You couldn't get a better dude up front than Randy Blythe to actually get the crowd interactive with that. Like, it was, that was the changing point for me. It was like, you know what? I take back what I said. You can be technical and really make a crowd just lose their minds.
Yeah, they changed the game when it came to being technical and still putting on a wild show. I remember seeing them at Ozfest 2004, and I think this was right after Ashes of the Wake came out. I'm pretty sure. And if you want to talk about a solid record run, like first 3 records for Lamb of God, it's just like, and I remember hearing As the Palaces, but I think the first record or first song I heard was that song Black Label.
Mm-hmm.
And they just came onto the scene out of nowhere, and it obviously for them it was a build. They had been at it for years, but when they did, I mean, New American Gospel, As the Palaces Burn, and then Ashes of the Wake, as far as a 3 record run, that's got to be one of the best 3-record runs that I probably top 10 3-record runs in metal for the last 30 years.
Oh, I'll agree. I'll agree.
When because it, don't get me wrong, like, you put out a good record, then you put out an okay record, then you put out a great record. As far as records go for them, those were 3 massive bangers, and I mean, dude, it just shot them up so high that, dude, they're still to this day in 2022, 20 something years later from when they started. I don't know what year exactly they started. I'm assuming, late 90s. So 25 years later, they are on that cusp of being one of the largest metal bands, period. They're going to be that next generation of bands that is going to be headlining your 15,000 seat amphitheaters.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It was, for me, and it's funny you mentioned that. Black Label was the first song that I heard by them, and that was what was on that CD. There were 3 tracks on that CD, that mp3.com, because what that was is, every month, I think you paid like $5 a month. They sent you a CD every month that was this collaboration of all these artists, because back then Spotify didn't exist. So when I was doing work on the computer at home for school or whatever it may be, I, got that subscription. I think I got like a gift card for Christmas or something, and that's what I spent it on. Like, one of my grandparents got me something or some money, and I had my parents do it, and I gave them the money. And so I got not only the online streaming part of it, because I could listen to what I wanted to, but I got the CD. It was kind of the thing they did. So forever, when I remember As the Palaces Burn coming out, because like, I remember some of the websites that I looked at the time, like Metal Hammer and all that stuff, like, it was, I remember that band coming out, but there was this like 2 to 3 year period, dude, that I had no idea that was the same band. So like, I remember Black Label being the song when I was going through that MP3 CD. I put it in the computer. I was sitting there scrolling through, and I would listen to a song. And I'm like, next, because a lot of them sucked, because mp3.com was like the original SoundCloud. You could record your own stuff and submit it to them, and they would promote it. That was the whole premise, right? So I got to that song, and I remember it starting it out with that dun dun dun. I'm like, what is this? So I'm listening to this, at like 1:00 in the morning on a Saturday, eating some bagel bites, doing some project work that was due a week ago for school, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, man, this is fucking badass, So I'm like trying not to listen to it loud so I don't wake my mom up, because our house is small, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, dude, this is badass. I got to find more on this. Well, I couldn't find any more, so I tried to go find CDs and stuff, but like, I remember when it came out, and then I put 2 and 2 together, because it was on, I don't want to say it was that long. It wasn't Philadelphia, because that was like their first live album, but I remember something happening, and I saw it and heard it on maybe MTV2. And I was like, holy shit, that's the same band. And I ended up finding out that they changed their name for promotional purposes or whatever. But yeah, Ashes of the Wake got my attention for them being mainstream. But when Sacrament came out, I had the mentality you did. Like, I'm like, these guys are going to change the face of what we know is metal in this genre, because Sacrament was like a whole nother ball game.
That wave of bands in, like, from, I'd say, like 2000 to 2005, there was so many bands that were pinnacle at that time, that a lot of them aren't necessarily around nowadays, but they shaped a lot of bands, and they shaped a lot of what we're listening to today. Like, I'll be honest, I wouldn't be in a band, period, if it wasn't for, your early 2000s metalcore bands. I wouldn't be in a band if it wasn't for your Swedish death metal bands in the mid to late 90s that shaped the metalcore sound in the 2000s, which is what kind of got me, full on playing music. So I have to give credit to a lot of those bands, and a lot of those bands aren't around today, but, you still have bands that are around that are still doing it and still kicking it and still doing really well. And it's cool to see bands like Lamb of God getting, staying that big over the last, however many years.
I mean, yeah, dude, it would be like you're saying, and this is funny too, it would be funny to go back because I still have it and get my CD album that I used to ride around with, almost killing myself flipping through it to listen to what I wanted to listen to every day in my car. But like,
oh yeah,
at that time, if you were to go through something like that, that CD from start to finish would be Unearthed, Trivium, Children of Bodom, Kill Switch Engage,
yes,
Hatebreed, Chimera.
yep,
Though I know exactly what you mean about why that shaped
yeah.
all that stuff. Because cheesy as it
Those are the
sounds,
bands.
you'd walk in the
Yeah.
mall and walk past the Hot Topic and you hear Hatebreed playing. You're like, all right, then, like
Yes.
I'm down with
Yes.
that. I'm just trying to get some sneakers today, but I'm down with this.
Well, yeah, that's the cool part, about being able to still see those bands at 33 years old is like, these bands legit shaped my teenage years, and
Oh yeah.
I was a teenager in 2002, like that. I turned 13 in 2002. So for me, going out and seeing Hatebreed and Trivium and Chimera and Lamb of God and like all those early 2000s bands. I mean, a lot of them started in the mid to late 90s, but their big years was the early 2000s. It's kind of cool to see, like I said, these bands still around and still putting out good music.
Oh, for sure. I was trying to think. Those are the ones, and like you said, a lot of them are not around anymore. And that's the sad fact, is that music is in a strange place at this day and age, as far as those genres. You know what I mean? Like
Yes, I
it's so
agree.
strange. I think one of the most defining moments for me is like getting older. Let's put it that way, is when rock and metal stations in Atlanta subdued to iHeartRadio.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
painstaking. Um, it was definitely strange. I didn't know how to process that. I was like, what do I do
Yeah.
now?
Well, it's weird. It's weird because radio for such a long time was, it was just your mainstream shit, and like you had your other stations that did okay, but like up here, throughout my childhood, we had 92.3 K Rock, right? Which
Right.
K Rock for us was, all your alternative bands. That's where I heard Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Metallica, Black Sabbath. They had all of your, kind of metal, hard rock, stuff like that. And then you had your classic rock station, which did, your Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, Leonard Skinner,
Yeah.
Sabbath as well, and stuff like that. But like, besides that, there was nothing else for me to listen to. You had, it was either pop music, hip hop, which at the time when I was listening to that stuff, it was like, it wasn't even the hip hop that I wanted to listen to. It was, Ja Rule and fucking, stuff like that. And I was just like, I don't want to listen to this shit. I want to listen to Big L and Biggie and Wu-Tang and Tupac and stuff like that. And that stuff wasn't on the radio because it was either too
Obviously.
vulgar or
Yeah.
it didn't sell. So yeah, it like you said, it's weird because music is in a weird place right now, and it's in a weird transitionary stage, I believe. But you also have guys that are sticking to their guns when it comes to music, and the guys that are running Sirius XM and you're running your liquid metal station and stuff like that. Those guys that are still into metal and still into the underground metal as well, like you'll see those guys out at underground hardcore shows, underground metal shows, like shows where there's 50, 60 people at St. Vitus or something like that, and they're really trying to find those new bands, to bring those new bands to radio and to the kind of like the metal limelight, where don't get me wrong, there's definitely a lot of bands that, it's a lot of favors and stuff like that, and radio will always be like that. But the majority of it's just like, all right, cool. Like these guys genuinely like the genre and genuinely love the culture. So, kudos to those guys. It's pretty sick.
Oh yeah, we had 99X, 96 Rock, and V103 The Beat, which was our rap station. And believe it or not, out of Atlanta, it was pretty surprising what they would play on those. 99X
Yeah.
was your alternative. Like the first time, like you say, first time I ever heard like Alice in Chains, it was on 99X. That was the alternative, like rock alternative metal station. 96 Rock was like half and half, because they ended up later on getting away from a lot of the classic rock and like what I would consider heavier rock. They went to what they call Project 961, which was, they would be outside the Masquerade every weekend for whatever show was going down. Like that's what they went to, and they didn't last that long, and because like I said, music got in a very strange place, especially here. Like, we had so many bands like that are common from here, but they're just not doing a whole lot. It's very strange.
Yeah. I was also under the impression that, like, I know our guitarist Pat lives in Atlanta, and he was saying that like a lot of people from Atlanta don't fuck with Atlanta bands, which
Nope.
is weird to me because usually, like, hometown shows for bands are massive. Like when we play New York and we play Long Island, like, dude, kids show out, and it's packed, and I know that, if most bands, if they're playing their hometown areas, like, everybody's like, yo, we gotta go support this. But for some reason Atlanta wasn't really like that.
Well, I mean, and the truth of the matter is I'll be honest with you, it comes down to demographic. Atlanta in the music world is not really known for metal. They're more known for hip hop, rap, things like
Of
that.
course.
So, I can be honest with you, if as much as I like Mastodon, okay, and I love Mastodon like a lot, if you gave me a choice between seeing that or Outkast is playing at Lakewood, I'm probably going to go see Outkast. I mean, it's just those guys. I mean, if you look at the artistry level, like, I know that I'm going to have a more of a good time at the Outkast show, where at the Mastodon show, I'm solely focused on watching dude just play technically. And it's going to be one of those things where I'm enjoying it, but probably no one around me would be, So like, it's strange because I think one of the only bands who's ever gotten a lot of love locally to Atlanta is Seven Dust. Seven Dust has never played a show that I have went to, whether it's at Masquerade, Tabernacle, Center Stage, wherever it may be here. They always sell out. There's this strange aura around those guys where it's just how they got their start, what they did, and they were really one of the first, like, of the new metal kind of thing. They were really one of the first hometown heroes.
Yeah, they're the last, kind of one of the last bands from that era that like still tours and still does the thing, and like they never made it big enough to the point where they are selling out arenas constantly.
Yeah,
I mean, they might have done that back in the 90s and the 2000s, obviously,
yes,
because they were huge back then. But nowadays there's only, I mean, when you think about it, there's maybe 3 or 4 bands that are still in that upper echelon of new metal bands that are still doing it to this day. And I mean, listen, obviously number 1 is Slipknot, number 2 is Korn. I mean, even to an extent, like Limp Bizkit's still doing it, and they're still playing at big venues, but they're not doing amphitheaters. They're doing club tours. Seven Dust is doing club tours. Mushroom Head's doing club tours. Head PE, like all those bands are just doing club tours. And listen, that's nothing to shy about, especially if you're selling out a 2,000 cap room. Like being able to sell out a 2,000 cap room,
it takes more than people realize.
Your prime, like that is no feat to shy, like, to talk down about. That shit is hard. Trust me.
Oh yeah,
But
and a lot of that is for bands like that is people fear missing out. You know what I'm saying? Like
yes,
it's that band has a legacy, right? And at the time that when that stuff was given, either those people are fans and they were just on the cusp of being old enough to go out on their own, and now they're adults and they're like, well, shit, I want to go see. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, I love Mushroom Head. But when Mushroom Head came out, I wasn't old enough to go to a venue by myself. I was having to listen to it on MTV Headbangers Ball. You know what I'm saying? Like that's
oh
like
yeah,
I have that CD, and at the same time, I was riding a school bus when I purchased Iowa. So in regards to Slipknot, so I'm gonna be real with you about that. Like I couldn't have gone to those things without, like, I couldn't even drive. So I mean, I couldn't. There's no way I could have went, and I'm not gonna tag my dad along to to this metal show. I'm gonna try to talk him into, hey, will you take my buddies and us there and drop us off? And he's like, well, they're not gonna let you in. So I get that 100%.
exactly.
100%. It's just that I'm with you. There's some that really reach the pinnacle up the top, and I think a lot of that had to do too with tenacity and creativity, staying with the times. Slipknot's obviously prime with that. Thankfully, for our benefit, what's his name? Limp Bizkit is not. I was trying to think of his name. I don't know why. Just slipped me.
Fred Durst.
Fred, yeah, I'm really thankful that Fred Durst has decided to like not create music. But
you know what, man? I'll be honest. That new Limp Bizkit record is pretty good.
Right? Yeah, and I
gotta take a second to sit down and listen to it one day. And like, it's kind of funny because at the time we were like, wait a minute. Like this is the new Limp Bizkit record. We were listening to it back in I want to say September, and dude, I was actually surprised that like these guys are still killing it, writing good music, however many years later. And obviously it's not for everybody, but it's all about having to reinvent yourself, and listen, the kings of doing that, which keeping their sound but also reinventing themselves, have been bands like Slipknot, bands like, even Lamb of God to an extent. Those bands, the reason why they're still big is that they're still writing good music, they're still coming out with good shit, but they're also listening to what's out nowadays and being like, all right, let's not change our sound, let's just incorporate and tweak a little bit so that we can grab this audience and still grow our following.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I'll be real with you. It's I'm with you on the Korn thing. That was a defining moment in my teenage years of finding Korn. Korn was the shit to me, man. Like I still think Jonathan Davis is a total badass and a weirdo at that.
Dude, I bought my Korn records from or I ordered my Korn records from that like 10 CD or 12 CDs for a penny thing.
Oh yeah.
And oh yeah, I got so much shit from that.
No, I'm with you on that. It's just, I think this is what I think is that in that time period in Atlanta, you could go see one of many things. I mean, you could see anything. You didn't know who was going to roll through, like Slipknot, Damage Plan, like we said, Chimera, Meshuggah, Mastodon, Mushroom Head. I'm trying to think of all the ones off the top of my head like that. But anyways, you had a plethora of bands at their prime to go see. So these shows were going to be absolutely killer. But when you talk about how you're talking about people in their prime are not wanting to see or being loyal, I'll give you a prime example of that in the Atlanta area is Motor Grader, right? So yeah. Motor Grader was actually a badass freaking band. And the thing is like, the only way I know to relate that, well, okay, because you talk about this, we'll relate this to motorcycle, seeing how this is kind of like a motorcycle musical podcast, is that to give you an example is like, look at the performance Harley industry and the stuff that we like, right? That in the motorcycle industry as a whole, even in regards to Harley Davidson's, is a very finite, small amount of people. It's very small. People don't realize how small it is. Yeah, we get on Instagram every day. It's a large social media platform, and we see all these badass bikes being built and people doing stuff and what have you, right? but in the scheme of the world, we're just a sliver of the pie of motorcycles globally, and we're just a sliver of motorcycles in the US. So as far as the American B twin Harley Davidson industry, the same goes for stuff like Motor Grader back in the day, where you really had to be into the underground metal scene of Atlanta to know who they were, when they were going to play, and where they were going to play. And you learned about other bands in that same regard. Fast forward to 2000, let's say 2010, right? 2011. Ivan Moody is now part of Five Finger Death Punch. You fast forward that to now, Ivan Moody is a household name globally. But in 2006, if you went to, I don't know, the little 5 Points to go see a show and Motor Grader was playing, you didn't know who Ivan Moody was, like, at all. And I don't care for Five Finger Death Punch. It's not really my thing. But as a musician, you could only hope for that kind of success, no matter if it's mainstream or not. But that dude, he found his formula and he made his money and made his career. And it's just funny because, like, that's the thing, is you wouldn't have known that. Now, I think with musicians today, and like you were talking about, listening and figuring out the formula, in Atlanta, metal really dominated things from the I'd say late 90s, 2000s into the 2010s, right?
Okay.
I would say, for me personally, from just the outside looking in, living in this area, right, is that through that whole time period, we also had some of the greatest hip hop artists that exist come from this area. Okay.
Oh, of
some
course.
Of the of the greatest, because I'm going to tell you now.
I know more hip hop artists from Atlanta than I do metal bands from Atlanta.
Right. And so I think that with metal being what I would consider aging in this area, is that hip hop has taken the front seat here. And maybe not necessarily in the way that a lot of us that are our age like, as far as that particular style of music. It's just that in that time period from, I'd say, 99 to 2010, you had the option of going to see Outkast or going to see, like Seven Dust, and you had all these badass bands around here. You had those options, and you could go see both in the same weekend. Nowadays, the metal guys are aging. They're not really doing as much. And then even stuff like Outkast, which to me, I would rank Outkast in the same line as Slipknot if you were talking about top artists, making mainstream things to where they're at as far as a household name. But now, because the metal stuff is aging, the hip hop influence has not stopped. It's still very predominant in Atlanta. And so you've got all these young emerging artists that are coming out with new music, and that's taking the front seat. And so we don't have a lot of new metal because it's not pursuant, because hip hop has taken over the entire music scene here, which is, it's not a bad thing. And a lot of it's not really my taste. Not to say that there aren't some killer artists here. It's just that it's going to be hard to persuade me, like we talked about in Milwaukee, that somebody coming out of Atlanta that's 20 years old is the next Gangstar. That ain't happening.
Well,
so.
Yeah, exactly. But I, at the same time, when you think about, Atlanta rappers, like, you always think T.I., you always think Ludacris, you always think a dude like Killer Mike. But, like, there's so many
Young Buck.
other, yeah. I mean, obviously Outkast, Andre 3000, Big Boy. I'm pretty sure Childish Gambino is from Atlanta as well. Donald Glover.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. Those guys, none of them sound the same. It's like, don't get me wrong, there's definitely a certain Atlanta sound, but
oh yeah,
a lot of these rappers have their own specific individual sounds. So it's like, listen, I love New York hardcore, but New York hardcore has a sound. And a lot of those bands sound very similar to one another, to the point where it's like, you can show me 10 different New York hardcore bands, and I'll probably say 3 different band names. I'll be like, oh, that sounds like, this sounds like that. And it's like, it might be another band that I've never heard of, but it sounds like an Agnostic Front song to me.
Yeah, like they're ripping off their style. It's an influence they took and they ran with it. No,
of course, but obviously you have those pinnacle bands like Madball, Agnostic Front, stuff like that, where Sick of It All, where it's, those are those things that in our area were always the fucking jam.
Yeah, don't forget we're real proud of Jermaine Dupri and Pastor Troy too. That's
Yeah.
That's some of our other heavy hitters.
Well, yeah.
Little
I mean,
scrappy.
yeah. You also have. I mean, you have Lil Jon too. Lil Jon's from Atlanta.
The Yin Yang Twins. I've actually seen the Yin Yang Twins in a club before, so like that was pretty funny.
That's awesome. But yeah, that's the thing. There's so many iconic artists, and it's cool to see individual cities, just like bringing it back to the bike thing, like a New York City style chopper is different than your SoCal chopper.
Oh,
Your SoCal chopper is different than your Texas chopper. Your Midwest choppers are different from your, whatever it may be, your up north choppers and stuff. So it's kind of cool to see how, your city and your surroundings, your physical surroundings, influence your creativity as a musician or a bike builder or a painter or whatever, form of art that you like.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. I would say that, which is strange because in the motorcycle front and like skating and BMX, it's really weird being in Atlanta because we don't really own anything like that. Like when you think about BMX, skating, motorcycles, and like you were talking about agnostic front, like because I do like a lot of punk music, but like New York and California own a lot of that stuff. Like when you talk about choppers, right? I know what a New York chopper looks like, but I also know what a Frisco chopper looks like, and those are two
Of course.
completely different styles, right? And so
Of course.
when you're here like us, like obviously we know who Indian Larry is because people here like iconicize that type of thing when it comes to choppers, because in Georgia we don't own anything when it comes to the motorcycle world, man. Like not one bit. All we're known for is big wheel baggers, fiberglass, and audio, and we jock that off to somebody else. That's one of the things like with what I do with bikes is I kind of want to create my own style for this area, which the funny thing is like I can't say that wholeheartedly because one of the things about being a teenager in this area is that you iconicize things from places like New York and California. Everything here, from skateboarding to BMX, had to do with both facets. And everything I started liking in motorcycles when I was younger was the fact that I looked at a lot of stuff in California and was like, man, I wish we had that here. So that influenced me to do what I do. You go look at that convertible I took to Mom and tried. That's 2000s California all the way, man. Like I can't sit here and say, well, that's my own style. It's not. It's what I did in my own way with some touches that are signature to what I do. But at the same time, there was some club guy in, 2000s California riding around on a bike like that had no idea that was going to create a whole style of something down the road because, I didn't create it. That I get what you're saying is it's funny how everything can influence you without even really understanding that, like, yeah, I like this and I created this, but at the same time, subconsciously it came from somewhere else.
Yeah, of course.
And the same goes for punk.
Even with like, riffs.
How many metal bands can I?
Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, how many metal bands can you point out and be like, oh yeah, that sounds like LA Thrash from 1982 with the opening riff? There's
exactly.
So many style points. People pick up on that kind of thing. Or at the same time, like you think about that, and then you think about, okay, well that's this heavy, slow drop C riff that's slow and just sludgy, and it's like, well, I know where that came from. I think that's the thing now in today's world is like it is hard to find originality for sure because there's been so many iconic great things before us. And I think a lot of people in today's world, because we have the internet and you can see everything, is that originality is pretty sparse.
Well, yeah, when you think about obviously I guess the topic of this whole podcast that we've been talking about is just creativity and stuff like that. Like when you look at, a Pinterest board or, Instagram or anything like that, you're gaining so much information that, you know, like you said, it might be a subconscious decision to put a, you know, a RP, an FXRP fairing on a lowrider, but like that came from somewhere, you know, that came from,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, dudes like where, you know, you were one of the first dudes, if not the first dude, to put an RP fairing on a Softail lowrider, or, you know, one of the new Softail models, you know. So and then years after that, you know, I see these Sport Glide bags come out, and these Sport Glide bags are going on regular lowriders, not even on Sport Glides, you know. So, you know, how
Mm-hmm.
many guys put those those 80s FXRT clamshells on a Dyna because they thought it looked cool, or, you know, so on and so forth. You know, you're going to get that idea from somewhere, and it is really hard to come up with a completely original idea, but it's that's the difference between someone who is, you know, taking inspiration and making their own thing, or just blatantly copying somebody and just, you know, changing one little small thing. You know, you got guys that are writing riffs that sound like, you know, they're B-sides to, you know, Slaughter the Soul, and they created an entire genre about it. To be completely honest, you know,
Right.
you had
Oh
you
yeah.
had guys in the early 2000s writing these riffs where, you know, you would alternate pick between your low string and your second string, you know, decca to decca to decca to decca to, and it's like, I know I know for a fact that you just listened to Slaughter the Soul for the first time, thought that this record was fucking amazing, and said, I want to write music like that, you know? Because honestly, when I was 15 years old, I did the same exact thing, you know? So it's the same thing
Oh
for
yeah.
bike builders, where they turn around and they see, you know, oh, wow, that. I mean, dude, listen, I'm no bike builder, but I do like what I like, and I see certain things in the motorcycle industry that I'm like, you know what, that looks really fucking cool. And, you know, actually, one thing that I wanted to touch on was, you know, when I first put up those pictures of the FXR T fairing, um, RT fairing on the lowrider or the Softail with the Sport Glide bags, I thought that model just looked fucking perfect. You know, so I wanted to recreate that because I was like, you know what, that looks really good. I'm not a builder. I'm just going to, you know what, I'm going to do the same exact thing because I think function wise and looks wise, it looks amazing. And, you know, that's when a handful of people hit me up. This was last August, you know, and you know, you and I had talked about the original bike, the original lowrider that you did. And
Yeah.
then, you know, a couple people hit me up and was just like, hey man, listen, like, don't buy a lowrider S right now. Just wait a couple
Yeah.
months,
Oh
you
yeah.
know. And obviously those people
We're
will
gonna leave it at that too.
remain
Woo!
unnamed,
Yeah.
but, you know, but that's the thing, like,
Right.
you know, and like, I wasn't sent pictures, I wasn't sent any information. They literally just said, don't buy it yet. And they said, wait.
No.
And lo and
Oh,
behold,
I'm with you.
that ST came out, and that ST dropped. And, you know, I had never said that I was going to buy a new bike. Never. I was just like, I'll never buy a new
Right.
bike, let alone a bike with a fairing and bags. And here I am,
No, I'm
you
with
know,
you.
a couple weeks away from picking up that ST, you know?
Yeah. No, and I'm excited for you because I mean, for the record, like I'm not gonna buy it. I'm just not. I've got other irons in the fire of stuff I want to do, and
Of
to like
course.
touch base on that, I'll break down the Softail thing is real quick here to make it not lengthy. But like for me personally, and I'm gonna go on record with all this stuff, is that the first when I started thinking instead of building bikes for myself and that I wanted to do a business was probably the last 2 years of the Dyna, right? I actually walked
Yeah.
into a Harley Davidson dealership and I still kick myself to this day. I was thinking about getting another motorcycle at the time. And also, my first street bike that I ever owned was in 2008. Was the first 2007 2008 was the first street bike I ever owned, And that was really, because we always had dirt bikes and whatnot growing up, but that was the first thing that really got my attention of like, I like this. This is what I want to do. Like I really enjoy this. And so, progressing through the years, jobs, this, that, and the other, the motorcycle was always the back burner of things. And not to sound cliche or cheesy, but I got divorced in 2015 and had been toying around with the idea. Like I had two C10s at the time. I had two square bodies. One was set up as like a drag truck. One was set up as like a lowered street truck. And I was big into cars. I'd worked in the car industry with different shops and stuff. And like, I was not working in the car industry and I still had a passion for it. But like, I always, every time I'd see a motorcycle drive by, I'm like, fuck, like, why did I ever get rid of any motorcycle I ever had? That was the worst decision ever. And I will never do it again for any reason. It doesn't matter. Like I literally am going to have to be getting kicked out of my house. The mortgage is not getting paid, that kind of thing for me to keep a motorcycle. Like I will not. It's the only thing that brings like a relief from everything and gives me the platform to express myself and how I want to express myself and create. Just like, I think that's why motorcycles and music go so well together, is freedom of expression, and you can do whatever you want. And I'll say it till the day I die. Harley Davidson motorcycles are the most customizable motorcycle that exists on the face of the planet. You can't do that with any other bike out there, and always will be. You can't do that with a Honda, and I love Hondas. The new CBR SP2, I've been eyeballing that thing for a while. I am not a brand loyalist, but when it comes to customization, you can't take an FTR 1200 or a Challenger or a Goldwing or something like that and do what you do with a Harley and make it tasteful. I just disagree. A Ducati, that's a totally different ball game. And I've even been eyeing some KTMs recently because I would really like to have a 1290 Duke just to ride, because we live close to the Blue Ridge Mountains. It would be real nice to have something specifically built to go like rip the shit out of that on my off days. But Softails. Yeah. So when that happened, I wanted to buy a Lowrider S in 2016 because they were coming out, and I'm like, fuck, this thing's badass. This is going to be a 1 year only bike, as they said, and I wanted to get one. Well, I ended up not doing it and making the worst decision of my life, which was buying a Road Glide. And I will forever stand by that till the day I die. I'm not a performance bagger guy. So I actually did a lot of things to that bike at that time. And locally, some people would take a notice of like, man, that's really cool. This thing's got 320 millimeter rotors on it, blah, 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 blah. And it was different because it didn't meet the mold of what's normal around here, because we do have a specific mold in North Georgia, and it's not my taste, just to keep it short. So when I heard about the Softails coming out, the Donnie getting like shit canned, I'm like, well, okay, so what are they doing? Like, it wasn't really, I had more curiosity than hate, which was like, okay, so they're just getting rid of the Donna, and all you're going to be able to do is go get like a CVO Breakout, a Softail Slim, a Heritage. Is that going to be the premise, or are they going to create something else? Well, so they started teasing photos of it, and I'm like, well, that's kind of cool, but I don't really care for this triangulated swing arm. But regardless, time came through, and I ended up buying one. So I bought one, and the first, on my record, I don't know about anyone else, the first Softail, if you've never seen it, that I saw with an FXRT fairing, and it actually had FXRT clamshells, was Adler Moto Design, is a guy who paints motorcycles out west. I don't know how many people out here know about him, but he paints a shit ton of badass motorcycles, specifically does a lot of club paint jobs. So I think that's where a lot of the hype for him is out west. But this dude built a bike that was like a green and orange. It was a very strange colorway. And when we get off this podcast, I'll send you photos of it. But he actually took the side covers that go on the Softail and squared them up so they look like a Dyna fuse cover and a Dyna battery box. And I'm like,
oh, wow,
that's pretty cool. And I saw some stuff from Brawny. I mean, I'm sure everybody's familiar with Brawny Built, Speed Merchant, those guys. I saw the stuff they were doing with the bike, and they created that swing arm that was very Dyna-esque, and I liked it. So when I heard that there was this Sport Glide model coming out, I got really excited because I think FXRs are cool. Ever since I knew what a Harley Davidson was in my adult life, I've always seen FXRs as kind of like this cool bike that wasn't actually that popularized here, but in other places, it was a big deal, you know? And I was like, for me, like chopper wise, I'll give you an example. I like choppers. A lot of people don't know that about me, but the choppers that I like have never really been, I guess, popular in any facet of choppers, because I do like more of the New York style. I think skinny choppers rule the fucking world. I don't like fat tired big dog stuff. It's not my style. It's not my taste. I like very, very narrow city jammer style choppers. Short front ends, very narrow tire, very narrow bars, purposely built for, you know, getting through traffic in busy areas, that kind of chopper. So when it comes to motorcycles, and yeah, dude. So in the modern day of motorcycles, when it comes to motorcycles, that's why I like older Dynas and FXRs, is because I like skinny bikes. So when I bought the Road Glide, I found out just how bad it sucks to have this giant motorcycle that you can't get through traffic with, that's bulky and heavy no matter what you do to it. It's just not my thing. I'm not saying they can't be built to be the best, but when I heard about the Sport Glide coming back out, I'm like, well, shit, I can have the opportunity to have a very small, what I call a mid-glide motorcycle. That's what I refer to as, you know, small bikes of the modern day that aren't baggers. I can get the wind coverage and the bags to take my old lady out touring when we want to go on these trips and we want to ride together and go to the mountains or something. And I can still have fun because we're on a small bike, you know? So when I saw the Sport Glide come out, I'm like, this thing is a piece of shit. I'm just going to be blunt about that. So I saw that shitty Batwing fairing and I'm like, what the fuck is this? You know, like, because I don't even like street glides. And the reason I don't like street glides is probably not because it's a good bike. It's just the demographic of street glides in my area. If you came to a local bike night, you would understand. So aside from that, I'm like, what is this? So when I decided the partner I used to have, and we said, we're going to make a business out of this. We're going to build motorcycles. It came down to like, okay, what are we going to do to set ourselves apart to be different? I came up with the concept of, well, this new Softail is a marvel of engineering on Harley's part. I'm going to make a bike that's really what I thought it was going to be. Because like the ST coming out now, I thought that's what the Sport Glide was going to be when they released it. Like I literally thought that's what was going to happen, because let's be real here. Well, what was the original Sport Glide? It's what the ST is right now. So I got excited and I was like, well, fuck, they didn't do that. So when I was researching this thing of creating this, there's two big names that come to mind. Calgary Harley Davidson in Canada was doing the what the fuck did they Battle of the Kings was what Harley Davidson called this. It was this program where dealerships across the world were building a bike and competing against other dealerships for this Battle of the Kings. So at the time, the only two things I saw. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so Pat that I worked with at first, he was a part of the team that built a Sportster for Nassau County Harley.
I got you. And I actually think I do remember this particular bike because I used to follow this stuff every day and go look at it, because there were some from Europe, because most of the stuff that came out of Europe was Sportsters. And I remember there being some really badass Sportsters that came out of Europe. One that predominantly looked like an XRTT. So what happened was I saw those two Sport Glides, the one that Calgary built, and then I saw Matt Laidlaw. The issue that I had was that it's a Sport Glide, you know, and I have this weird OCD thing with, like, obviously the engineering aspect of it, right? I was like, well, why do these motorcycles have wheels on them that look like they were from a 1994 Z28? Like, that was my big complaint, right? Because I wanted to buy that bike and get that bags and put the fairing on it, whatnot. But so when I started looking more into the Sport Glide, I'm like, this thing is not what it is. It's almost like a Softail Slim or something with these bags on it. Fuck that. We're going to make a real Sport Glide. And that's what we deemed it with the hashtag. Now, you have to understand, at this time, our Instagram probably had 900 people that looked at it every day in 2018, 2019, when we started this project. Hey, nobody knew who I was or gave the fuck about what I did. So, you know, I was just posting this stuff every day. And that's what started to get the attention, because you look at an FXRT, that basically was a Super Glide with fairing and bags. That was what it was. It was not a completely separate platform with bags and a fairing. The only
Sure.
discrepancies I had with those two bikes is that Adler Moto Design was the first lowrider that I saw with an FXRT fairing. Calgary Harley Davidson was the first quote unquote true sport glide that I saw. Matt Laidlaw's bike with the Coast Glide that they did was the first one I saw that had like the tour pack where it made it look like it was an FXRD, like it was a Grand Touring. But the issue I had with Laidlaw's bike is they used an enforcer wheel from a bagger on the front, and they still had the salad shooter wheel from the Sport Glide on the back. That kind of bothered me from like a standpoint. I'm like, I don't really like that. So
Dude, Pat hates when people change the front wheel and don't change the rear wheel.
it's
And I
com-
understand that most of the time you can't see it because it's the bags are there or whatever, but it's just one of those things that once he said it, I lost my mind.
Here's the deal, man. Like I can hear Pat saying that for one, because obviously I know Pat, but my thing is I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. And I'll be honest with you, I've had some good conversations with Matt Laidlaw, and I like Matt. I think Matt's a cool guy, but it's bitching out. Like it's a bitch move to say, well, we're not gonna worry about the rear wheel. Like you're building a custom motorcycle for the world to see. You should take the time and effort to make that a reality, right? Within the means that you have possible, because it could have been done. So for me, it was like, okay, we're going to do this the right way. We're going to go to the dealership. We're going to buy a lowrider today, and we're going to make this happen. I went to the dealership, which was actually the sister dealership of the one that my wife works at, right? I bought a 2019 lowrider like January 1st, and I bought a black one, the only one they had. The lowrider S was obviously not a thing yet, right? So they had one that didn't have ABS, whatever. I buy the bike, get the deal done. As soon as I get the deal done, she was actually there with me. And so I'm like, all right, we got to go to parts. And she's like, why? I'm like, well, I got this printout. Dude, I had the entire printout from her dealership, the parts manager, of those Sport Glide bags and every single part that you had to buy them. I go to the parts counter and I said, I want to order all of this. And the guy looks at me with a look like, I'm gonna fucking kill you. Like he did not, he was not enthused at all. He's like, are you joking? I'm like, no, every part on this parts list that I've highlighted and I've circled, these are the quantities and these are what I need, because I've looked in the service manual for this. The parts manager I deal with in Cartersville, he got me this stuff. I need this stuff. So we sat there and we spent $3,800 freaking dollars, dude, to get all those parts to make that happen. The bags came in like 2 months later. The fairing came in, and I started building that bike. And when I started building that bike, that's actually when I got like Jeff Holt. Like I started knowing who Jeff was because I see this V-Twin Visionary clicking like on our post, because apparently the stuff I'm doing is getting shared. And the day that bike, I posted a picture of the saddlebags on that bike. That is the first lowrider that we know of that ever had those saddlebags on it. And it was a feat to make it happen, because I didn't really have the capacity in our shop at that time to make a lot of stuff like we do now. And there was so many parts that were not out yet, because this was a completely new platform. So companies are, they're rushing to try to get stuff out to market that they haven't done. But we found out all of this interchangeability, but on that frame and how stuff works. Like the bike came with the passenger pegs on the lower setting of the holes on the frame, but the Sport Glide had those mounts that went there. So if you looked at the passenger pegs on the Sport Glide, they were in the next hole up. We ordered exhaust. So we ordered a pipe from Bassani because nobody else had a pipe at the time, and we didn't have the means to do it in-house yet. So when I ordered the pipe, I asked them, I was like, hey, are the brackets that you guys sell for this pipe different for the Sport Glide than they are for the lowrider? And they're like, yeah. They're like, the only difference is we drill the hole for the Sport Glide to have the mounting hook for the saddlebag, and on the lowrider, we drill it in a different spot for the passenger peg to mount, just like the factory does in the exhaust. So we started figuring all that stuff out. And really the claim to fame of us getting in the spotlight was people sending us emails every day for information on how to do it. I mean, that's all they wanted.
Yeah.
They just wanted to know how to do that. And on the like lowrider forum on the Facebook page, which I stay the fuck out of, dude, Facebook is horrible. So they had this whole post of that where it had this guy had taken the time to email us, and he screenshotted the emails and like, these are all the parts you need. This is what Denton says will fit, this, that, and the other. And all these people are trying to buy these bags. And the thing is when we decided to get rid of that bike, we parted a bunch of it out before we got rid of it. There was a girl in California that goes by the name Erin Pittman that actually bought those bags for me to put on her bike, because she wanted those bags, but people didn't want to pay retail for them because they were ridiculous.
Obviously.
So
Well, yeah, when I was looking into it, obviously you just said it was $3,800 to part those bags out, because Harley doesn't sell those bags as a kit.
no, they still don't.
So it's, exactly. So you got to part them out, and it's just like, it's hard. It's definitely hard. I think the only part that they sell online is the outers,
Yeah, because they color match them for you.
Exactly.
That was something
So
that
it's
came
just,
later on.
it's kind of wild that that they cost that much, but I listen, I understand it, but there's definitely certain people that I've come across that just kind of lucked out and said, "Oh, well, I found a guy that was selling his Sport Glide bags. He didn't like the bags. He put, Leather Pros on his, on his Sport Glide, so he sold me the bags for $100." And I'm just like, "Dude, fuck off." But sometimes it's just like that. And I know now there's companies that are making aftermarket versions of those bags. And I know a lot of people complain about the fact that the right side and the left side bags are different heights and stuff like that because of the exhaust and so on and so forth. But there's aftermarket companies that sell replacement right side bags so that they're the same height. And
Oh yeah.
it's just, those small minor things that people get, all uptight about. But I think overall, this ST, they kind of gave everybody what they wanted and what they were looking for in a bike. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely those small little nuanced things that, I can pick apart from a personal standpoint. I wish that, there was an actual, dash in the fairing. I wish that there were pockets in the fairing. I wish there was, small things like that. But I think overall, I think they did a pretty good job for a stock bike.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I got zero complaints. And here's why I got zero complaints. All right. If you go back to some of those posts from those years, it really made my day back then for people to say, it would be so cool if Harley did this or Harley did that, blah, 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 blah. Here's my thing, is that the fact that you have a guy at the helm of the styling and design department who is literally attending events, paying attention to what this industry wants and needs, and within the means that he has feasible by still, doing it from a corporate standpoint, because a lot of people can't wrap their head around that. They think that, oh, well, you should be able to do this completely how it needs to be done, like with the bags and stuff like that. Sure. But you don't know what goes on behind the scenes to make this regulatory and why it has to be that way. Right. So
Of course.
my thing is I think everything that you mentioned, for sure, I'll be transparent and say, I've already started to work on some of that stuff myself as far as what I want to design for the bike and release as far as parts. To what you're saying is to give it that feel. But at the same time, no matter how you feel about Dinah's not being here, or the fact that it's a monoshock, or that it's missing a few things and this, that, and the other, Harley actually listened to a sliver of the motorcycle industry and said, you know what, here you go. And so for me to have that resurgence in a way of kind of an FXR, a nod to the FXR world, and the fact that our little small niche of people that do things in the Harley industry was able to collectively have a voice for them to do that, to me, that's a 100% success rate and accomplishment. And I'm grateful for the fact that in my lifetime of doing motorcycles that happened.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were sitting at Mama Tried, and we were talking to Brad about it, and the fact that listen, man, my dad raised me on shovel heads, and I'll always be a shovel head guy. Like, don't get me wrong, I have, at this point, I got a Pan, I got a Jenny, I got a shovel, I got an Evo, and I'm getting the ST. But the thing is, for me, it's like, to break someone that is a shovelhead guy out of that mentality in order to buy a new bike and be stoked on buying a new bike, it's definitely a hard feat. It's definitely a hard task to break someone else, or to break someone out of that mindset that they only like old bikes. And listen, man, it's one thing to, put out something that is, an okay product, but, oh, this is going to go for this demographic, so on and so forth. Man, they hit it right on the nose when they needed a perfect mid-level touring bike. Because
Yeah.
they used to make the touring Sportsters and stuff like that. They used to do the touring bags on Sporties and shit.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, that the touring world, you didn't really have a mid-level. I mean, you had the switchback and stuff like that, and that was on the Dynaframe, and like they were cool, but when was the last time that they had those made? It's
Oh
been
yeah.
a minute.
T
So
T Sport. I mean, any of that.
yeah, exactly.
I
They
mean,
they haven't really touched on that too much, and the thing is, for me, a road glide, and I don't know, I know certain people that I'm friends with are like, oh, you should just get a road glide, get a road glide, get a road glide. Dude, those bikes are too big for me, at least, and it's like,
yeah,
I enjoy riding them, and I've ridden Pats a bunch, and I've gotten my time in. And street glides I don't really like, just aesthetically, like it looks like a
yeah,
grandpa bike,
yeah.
but I like the aesthetics of a road glide. I think road glides look great, but I think they really nailed it with that ST, and I'm kind of excited to see what happens in the future with that bike. And I'm pretty excited to see how people are going to customize that bike.
There's going to be an entire subculture with that motorcycle inside of what we have. I think you're going to see a lot
Yeah,
of diehard FXR guys eventually cave in, because a lot of your Dyna Softail haters, it took them a year or two to convert, and then after that, they're like, "Well, this is not so bad." Like, no shit, guy, you got to be open to
yeah.
change. You know?
Wait till they start seeing those all customized. Wait till they start seeing them all customized at a show. 3, 4, 5 years down the line. You're gonna start to see those because. So check it out. At the Daytona V-Twin Visionary show, right? We went to the infield show that Jeff did on Friday, and there was one Softail. One. Just
Yeah,
one. Everything else was a road glide. Everything else was a road glide.
yeah.
So now you have a platform, for, your performance guys. You have a touring platform to where, dude, you're going to start seeing like a massive influx of those STs.
I think
And,
so. It's
I'm glad that I'm one of the first ones to have one.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm jealous of that fact because I mean, obviously for me, transparency is that it's a business expense and we have to focus what we project as long term for ourselves.
Of
There's a
course.
lot of changes going here now. Not to say we're not going to design parts for it. Of course we are. I've got some things up my sleeve for that bike that I think, even stuff you mentioned, that are gonna find solutions to the discrepancies that exist. I'll put it that way without giving too much because this industry is very copycat.
Of course.
That's the thing. It's like, and I know how you feel. Imagine being us and going to a show with a Softail, and I'd be honest with you, I've been the only Softail, and
Oh yeah.
I'm like, well, I guess we're just gonna do our thing out here, and that's the thing. Is like, I think what a lot of people don't understand is that I'm gonna be real with you. You can't jump on a lowrider S and then go jump on a road glide, and you're by yourself. Go ride both, and you tell me that road glide's more fun. It's not. I don't care what you
Yeah.
do. It's lethargic, and I don't care how much money you spend on it, on what parts you buy. It's lethargic. It's a touring bike, and you and I vibe on that because like it's just not our thing, right? And
Of
so
course.
when people talk about, well, I've ridden a dyno with a T Sport fairing or clamshell or whatever, and it long hauls, it just didn't take the wind off of me, and the touring bike's so much more stable at speed and blah 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 and this that, and the other. I'm gonna be honest with you. The best thing about when we built the FXLRT, right, is that I had never in my entire life had the chance to ride a motorcycle like a real FXRT or with that fairing. Those Sport Glide bags, even though they don't hold as much as a touring bike, right? I actually Sierra bought me the inserts for like Father's Day or something that go in the Sport Glide bags to pack your stuff in that have the little handles, the little cloth ones. She bought me those to go in the bags, and then it had the FXRT fairing, right? That setup
Yeah.
is the biggest compromise between having a T-Sport and not having a lot of wind coverage, and having a Road Glide without the width, where you still are on a narrow, small platform that performs and cuts to the wind and has storage capabilities for just somebody riding one up or two up. And you get the best of both worlds, and there is no comparison. I can't stress that enough. And if you haven't ever ridden something like that, you should try, like before you discount saying, well, it's just a soft tail with a fairing and bags. It's not. It's a completely different animal.
Yeah. It's
to
different.
me.
It's But it's also, with us, I do feel like we have a little bit. And listen, I'm not saying that I have all of the experience with, road glides, but I've ridden one long enough to be like, this just ain't for me. For some people, it's for some people. It's not for other people. It's just like choppers, man. Like, dude, some people don't fuck with choppers, and I get that, and I understand that. Some people just don't fuck with shovel heads. They're like, you know what? I don't want to deal with it. I'm like, I love these motors. I love the bikes. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I don't love the headache, but it's all about, working on it yourself. The journey of being like, hey, like, I know this thing front to back, top to bottom. So like, I vibe with them. But
no, I get that.
For certain people, it's just not it's all personal preference when it comes down to it.
I mean, yeah, I think the easiest way for me to put it is some things just feel like home. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of that stuff's opinionated, but sometimes familiarity builds a bond that we don't like to get away from. And I feel you on the bagger thing. I've never had buyer's remorse with hardly anything in my life because I'm so ingrained on researching and trying to figure out what I want. But when I bought that Road Glide, I had it like a day and a half, 3 days, and I'm like, the fuck did I do, man? Like, I really messed up. Like, I could have had a brand new Lowrider S, and I bought a used Road Glide for the same price. And like, what did I do? And now you can't buy an original Lowrider S for less than 20 G's,
Oh, dude. Oh, yeah.
And I still love those bikes, which is what our main focus is right now, is working on dynos, which is proven to be quite the headache. So
trust me, I know how that is. But, hopefully, in the future, it's like, I mean, with me with this Lowrider ST, like, I'm stoked, but I'm going to keep it as is for a while. I don't think I'm going to, go crazy with changing too many different things and stuff like that, just because, there's a couple reasons behind it, but I want to enjoy it how it was intended to be enjoyed, and then I'll change it later if I find out that I don't like certain things about it,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, here's a question. How hard is it going to be to go receive the motorcycle and then go on tour?
Oh, dude, don't even get me started. Like, to be completely honest, like, I don't even know if it's going to be at the dealership before I leave for tour.
I would actually prefer that if I were you, though. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, exactly.
You got something to look forward to when you come back, as far as that, And you're going to be
I gotta
riding season.
Yeah, I gotta go out to Wisconsin when I get back from tour anyway, for the King of the Baggers stuff. So I'm pretty sure that I'll be out there for the V-Twin Visionary show and all that stuff. So if it doesn't come in time and it comes in, after I leave for tour, then I'll probably end up just saying fuck it and, maybe even flying out to Wisconsin and riding it back.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And let's go ahead and cover this basis because it needs to be covered as a shameless self-promotion of our great friend, Mr. Tommy Donnelly. But let's talk about how House of Harley, for any dealership or any employee of a dealership that is listening to this podcast right now, has completely changed the face of what a modern Harley dealership is and should be in every aspect, in every way.
Yeah, I mean, Tommy, we started talking after Sturgis, and I realized that he was from Long Island originally. And
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Yep. He grew up maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles away from where the first manufacturing warehouse is.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny, um, that we started talking about that, and he was just like, "Yeah, I'm coming out in September." We met up, we hung out for a little bit, and obviously we got to hang out more during Mama Tried, and when I went out there to hang out for the weekend, and honestly, man, like the way he rolls the dealership, and he's got a very smart mind and a very he's got a big old brain when it comes to business and making sure that he's got his hands involved in the right things. And as far as buying a bike, I don't think anybody could have made it easier. I obviously I wouldn't know because I didn't work with any other dealerships, and
Right.
there's a lot of other dealerships and people from dealerships that I'm friends with that probably could have made it somewhat similar, but Tommy got it done for me, and I am beyond stoked to be able to work with them and get that ST from that dealership.
Yeah. I just, there's I say that with in regards to like how, stuff's changing in the industry, and this, as well as I do, is like as an enthusiast, there's a stigma that always comes with the dealership, right? And I still deal with some that I feel like they're 20 years behind the scope of what's going on. As far as in the industry, because I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, a lot of people work at dealerships that are not motorcycle people. It's just a job to them. It's not a big deal,
They're
but
salesmen.
they're salesmen. But when it comes to Tommy, he lives, breathes, eats the lifestyle and the community and everything that goes with it. And so that passion that he has, not only as in his personal life, but he lets that come into the business world of his what he does at that dealership as the GM. And he has created something that, like, when I first visited there, and I really hadn't spent a lot of time around him, just at different shows where I'd been introduced to him by other people. And when I actually went to that House of Harley thing that he had with the industry show or whatever, it really started to take shape to me, like, wow, this guy gets it. And I've never met a more humble and hospitable person at a dealership in my entire life. One of the things I always get that kind of sucks is when I go to a dealership, and if it's someone that does know who I am, they have like this weird thing where they're trying to like flex or whatever for whatever reason. And like, I don't
Yeah,
like that. I just want you to like have a normal conversation with me. And like, if you have a bike outside, show it to me, because I'm probably going to think it's cool, and like
of
just do that kind of
course.
thing. And so Tommy made me feel like I was just like, I don't know. It just made me feel like I was family and like had known the dude for, 15, 20 years. And like, you don't get that a lot of times. You walk into a dealership, and if you're not buying anything, they don't give a shit what you're doing, and that's frustrating. And I hope that stuff that he's doing up there is reflected in the industry, and everybody, even though it's out of state, starts to really push it. Like, if you're going to buy a motorcycle, call Tommy Donnelly, House of Harley, and buy a motorcycle from
Yeah,
House of Harley,
exactly.
because I
Yeah.
want Harley Davidson to take note of that as a corporation, and them to start push that type of mentality and business model out to other dealers. And I think you'll see a larger insurgence of sales with young people because of how they do business.
Yeah, there's a lot of dealerships that I've been to within the last year and a half, 2 years that you know that are on their way to becoming really fucking cool dealerships. I mean, you got Tobacco Road, you got
Yeah.
Tim's Harley Davidson, you got, I mean, dude, Smoky Mountain in Tennessee is probably one of the coolest dealerships I've ever been to in my life.
It's massive.
Um, it's not only is it massive, they have concerts, they do events, they have
Oh yeah.
the bikes that they have sitting in the dealership that are from their collection are just mind blowing, and it's cool to be able to like just look around and see cool shit, and so kudos to those dealerships for kind of paving the way and showing other dealerships that it's cool to step outside of the box, not necessarily step outside of the box, but it's cool to step around the box that corporate has created.
For sure. I agree with that tenfold, man. Because
But yeah, you know, it's cool to be able to see that happening.
So how long are you on tour for again for Europe? Month, 2 months?
Man, I am out from. We start rehearsals on the 29th
Uh,
of April,
April? Yeah.
and then I'm out until the 30th. We fly home May 30th from Europe, so I'll be home for about 3 weeks after that, and then we'll be out again, and then out again. Like I'm gonna be gone pretty much this whole summer. Going to some new places that eventually will get announced, but it'll be cool to be able to do that stuff.
Yeah, because I haven't actually, when we were talking outside of this, I haven't had a chance to say, what's in the plan. So basically, you're back full time working as a musician as it goes. Is
Oh, it is. It's on, man. It is on. Like it's kind of funny. Like, the band group chat has been nonstop this last week about our plans for the summer and for the fall and stuff like that. And to be able to sit down and talk with everybody about doing more touring and more touring and just stacking things on top of each other. Getting back to that routine, it brings me back home. It kind of grounds me a little bit.
right.
You
That's
know,
good. Yeah,
but yeah.
that's what you want. I mean, I know we talked when we were doing the clubhouse thing with everybody that you were pretty bored out of your mind when you were, the world was shut down and there was no touring. It was kind of stagnant.
Yeah, like I mean, don't get me wrong. There was a lot of cool things that I did. Obviously with me, working at first, for a year and a half, like that was awesome. And I got to hang out with a lot of cool people and hang out with friends and do the cool shit. But now getting back to the touring thing, I mean, dude, it's what I've always loved doing and what I continue to love doing. So it's a little bit of me getting back to my old routine, and it's my comfort zone.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. And I'm glad the world's starting to hopefully open back up to stuff like that because it's bleak for a long time.
Oh yeah, and everybody was in the same boat with being kind of miserable and not knowing what to do, and a lot of people had to reinvent themselves. But I'm very glad that I guess my personal reinventing was definitely life changing. So but question, am I going to see you down at the V Twin Visionary show in Atlanta?
That is something that's on the table right now. I'm not sure. I'm actually unsure. I was actually texting Jeff the other day, and I never got around to talking about it. I'm not. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to make it with everything we have going on. So there's a lot of stuff going
Ah,
on, and it's sad because this is our home thing. I'm not sure how many shows we're going to make this year that are, I would consider, more of the smaller events.
yeah,
Obviously, Sturgis is something that I feel like is never off the table.
of course.
I'm a huge fan of the hometown rally in Milwaukee in the fall. That's one of my favorite events now that I've actually experienced it. I don't think I'll ever give that one up. Daytona was completely unfeasible this year, but to be transparent, this has been a very reinventing year for Denton Performance Design. Did a lot of mental struggling through the wintertime this year and trying to get through some stuff. I guess you could call it writer's block for motorcycle builders. It was very strange,
Oh fuck yeah, that
mainly
happens all the
because
time.
I don't know. Like I don't know. Imagine having a business and saying, "Well, what's going to be the next big thing that we can create on?" It's sink or swim in that regards. However, at the same time, I'm at a point where I'm not really worried about what the next big thing is. I'm more worried about what I want to do and what I want to do passionately and get that out of my system as far as creating the things I want to create. So the problem is we got two motorcycle lifts with two dynas, two iconic dynas tore apart in here that don't run. So going to a motorcycle show without a motorcycle is kind of a shitty thing. So,
Oh
you know,
fuck yeah.
could we slap it together for April? Sure. I mean, that show that weekend is my birthday weekend. So it's something that I would love to be at. It's just that I've had to sit here at 2 o'clock in the morning, shutting down my computer after drawing all evening and say, what's the smartest thing to do? Because obviously I will always want 100% give my support to V-Twin Visionary, right?
Yeah.
Jeff has done a lot of good things for the industry. Jeff is a very dear personal friend of mine outside of his business. And I want nothing more than to support him, which is why you see our name on the back of his RV, because I will constantly support that tour, whether I can make it or not to every event. I would love to make it to every event. That would be ideal, right? But from a
Of
business
course.
perspective, it's almost impossible for me. In the future, that may be a thing, but I'm at a turning point, and I think that some people will get it and some people will not. We will always continue to develop on air-cooled models, especially the fact that right now we're focusing on 99 to 05 Dyna. And I mean, I guess that translates into 99 to 17 if you want to be realistic. But the two bikes that are in here that are, I guess business bikes, but obviously they're personal to me, is that these are bikes that will probably never be sold outside of this business. No matter where I go or what I do, these are bikes that will live in infamy as long as the shop exists in the windows of wherever we're at, whatever warehouse, and they will be ridden and all that good stuff. But I'm creating the two things I've always wanted to create, no matter how hard and how much time and money and mental anguish I have to go through to create. These are the unicorns that I've always wanted to create. Dyna instability obviously is an issue. We've wanted to take care of that for a long time in a proper way through proper engineering, because it's always been a patch. It's never been addressed, in my opinion, to the extent that it needs to be addressed at. Obviously, the ST will borrow one locally. We have some people here that are getting them, and we've kind of set up some things where they're going to loan them to us and help let us develop parts for the industry, because I feel like in the Softail world, we were one of the first shops to embrace that platform in the way that we did and how we did it.
Yeah.
I was very sad to see the FXXT go. Business-wise, it had to happen, right? But for
Of
me
course.
personally, as much as this will probably burn some minds, because a lot of people have not really well received it, right, is that the next bike we purchase will have a Revolution Max in its at its core, as far as its power plant. I think that getting on the forefront of that is going to be a big deal, because it's very unexplored territory. And I know that as much as you and I and everyone else loves our beloved air-cooleds, and I will always own an air-cooled Harley for the time that I exist on this earth as a mortal, is that Revolution Max eventually will be in every platform that you buy if you want to ride a Harley Davidson that's a newer model. I don't
Yeah,
see
I
any
don't
way
doubt that at
around
all.
it. And to put that into layman's terms for people is like, well, it's not really a cost thing or this, that, and the other. The EPA is a giant, and the EPA controls what tier one automotive manufacturers do, which is what Harley Davidson falls under. There is no power sports sector. It's just tier one automotive. In a engineering facet, as regards to EPA, they killed the Sportster and brought the new Sportster out, which make sure everyone goes and signs up for the release coming out on the 12th. The thing is that you can't control what comes out of the tailpipe if you can't control the temperature of the combustion chamber. Using Mother Nature as a coefficient, i.e. air cooling, that variant changes wherever you go and ride that motorcycle. The only way to comply
Yes.
with increasingly stringent EPA standards is to use water as your cooling coefficient to control what comes out of the tailpipe. So the thing is, eventually the dinosaurs that we know and love will go by the wayside of that. And I want to be prepared. I want to be ahead of the curve. And I have some ideas where, and this is no slight, because I consider Brad Richards a very good friend, and I look up to Brad for a lot of things. He is an amazing human being. However, from our perspective as to what we like and our opinions, I have some ideas for Revolution Max to style it in a way that would probably be better well received by our community and our little slice of niche of motorcycle industry than how it's been done thus far.
I'm curious.
I have it in that regard, and I will share some of those things with you behind the scenes, because obviously that's what we do. I will share some of those things, and not to mention, as not only in that light, but also I want to experiment in the light that I have a passion for, which is motorsports. I want to create. I truly, at the heart of this, is where it would be totally against everything that I do right now. Is I truly want to create an American sport bike that is GP capable, that we can be proud of stateside, with a Harley Davidson power plant that could compete with something like a Panigale. I really want to see that, because it doesn't exist. And as much as I like riding big, heavy cruisers, it's my thing. I really want to create that, because it just doesn't exist. I mean, it's as simple as I can put it.
Hey, trust me, I would love to see that. Absolutely love to see that. But with that said, it is getting late.
Good talks for sure. Yeah,
dude.
For sure.
I was thinking about it. I was just like, I just looked at my clock, and I was just like, holy shit, it's 10:30 already. We've been on here for 2 hours, over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Well, dude, thank you so much for sitting down again. I know, we sat down a couple months back, but it never came to light. But dude, thank you again.
For sure.
Where can everybody find you? Shout yourself out.
At Denton Performance Design on Instagram, www.dentonsoccer.com. On Instagram, feel free to hit us up. I actually personally message everyone back all the time. It may take me a couple of days to get to you. It's just the nature of the beast, but that's where you can find us.
Hell
And
yes.
also, thanks for having me again, dude. Like, I'm flattered to be on your podcast. And obviously, I value this relationship and our personal one very in high regard. So I hope tour goes well for you. And I really hope that I can work something out to be able to actually physically come hang out in Atlanta, even if it's not at the show and I'm able to squeeze down there in the evening or something and have dinner and whatnot. We'll try to make that happen.
Let's see. I'll be down there from Thursday night to Tuesday morning. So the 21st to the 26th. I fly out at like 9. So like realistically, like the 22nd to the 25th, I'll be there like all day.
All right. 10-4 for sure.
So yeah. Well, I thank you again, and I'll talk to you soon. I'll shoot you a text.
All right, dude. Have a good one. See you.
All right, everybody. That about does it for this episode of Thrash and Throttle. I want to thank John again for sitting down with me. We sat down a couple months back, but obviously I never released that episode. I never got around to editing it or doing anything with it. So I'm glad that we could sit down again and talk about music and motorcycles and the things that we love. Stay tuned for the next couple episodes. I will be releasing episodes every couple weeks nowadays, just because I finally have the time and I want to get back on the horse with this. So if you enjoy it, go like us on Instagram, go like us on Facebook, all that jazz. Follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever you like the most. And I'll see you guys next time.